Hi everyone, I'm talking to Hello everyone, and welcome back again to Teachers Talk Radio at the Schools and Academy show in Birmingham. I'm now joined by Steve Rollett. Steve, if you just want to introduce yourself very quickly to everyone.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Steve Rollett. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive at the Confederation of School Trusts.
Brilliant. Steve, what's been your you can either do takeaway from the day so far, we're at about lunchtime, or what you're looking forward to for the rest of the day? No, you're heading off, aren't you?
I've got to go.
So what's been your takeaway then?
Well, so it's been a brilliant morning so far. I was involved in a conversation on the main stage, really looking at the 2030 agenda and all schools being part of a trust, which obviously I advocate for, and something I think is not a bad idea at all. But what we did in the conversation was we picked through some of the issues, some of the challenges. Of course, there were questions that some schools have got about autonomy. We talked about some of that stuff, and also we talked, really obviously about the current funding crisis, and the situation schools and trusts find themselves in. Of course, we were talking before we'd heard the government announcement, and I'm still trying to catch up with that now.
I haven't seen it.
But yeah, it felt like a really important time to have that conversation.
Talking of sort of teaching at the moment, because obviously we are Teachers Talk Radio, so I've got to sort of ask you some questions about teachers. Do you think that teachers should go on strike next year?
It's a really good question. I mean, I'm not sure that's a question that I can answer. I suppose what I can say is, we have in our country, we have really important infrastructure, don't we? That of which trade unions and people's ability to strike, I think, is a really important right that people have. They have to follow particular procedures.
Concerned are you at the moment about sort of teachers leaving and quitting and going into other roles? Because that seems to be more than at any point, certainly since I entered the profession in 2007 now, especially coming out of COVID with the possibilities of remote work and all that. I mean, what can you and anyone else in the sort of organisations in and around teaching sort of do to help that?
Yeah,
what are you doing to help?
What am I doing to help? No, it's a great question. So firstly, it is a massive challenge. So I realised the other day that I trained to teach 20 years ago. So I've been in and around teaching for 20 years. I've been out of the classroom for 6, right? So I agree with you. It feels to me like the most challenging time around recruitment retention. We see that in the data. NFER do some great research on this, and they're telling us a very troubling story. The government not being able to hit targets for specific subjects as well. And of course, the thing I'm hearing from, which is really interesting as well, is non-teachers leaving the profession as well, and leaving schools. And of course, that has an impact on them. It also has an impact on teachers, right? Because they're going to rely on those colleagues to help them with particular things in the classroom or support outside the classroom. If those colleagues aren't there, then the risk is, I think, then does more fall on the shoulders of a teacher workforce that's already feeling the strain of the pandemic and all that we've seen in recent years. What am I doing to help? What are we doing at CST to help? Well, we are really clear actually that the reason I advocate for trusts and I think schools ought to be in the family of schools, the MultiAcademy Trust, isn't because I'm some sort of person that's obsessed with structures and like the legal framework of academisation. I think what it does is it connects teachers together. Right? I remember as a trainee teacher, as a new teacher at NQT, as it was back in the day, in the local authority I worked in, it was brilliant. Right? We had a really good, thriving history community, right? And we had teachers who would give up a couple of hours every half. We're already seeing it in trusts.
But to sort of push back against that in some senses, there would be those who would say it doesn't really matter what system or what sort of what the system behind the school is.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. Which is why I say I'm not advocating for that system on system's sake, but there is a difference. And what I saw in that experience I had in the local authority is what changed over time. There's individual schools, individual people. Sometimes there was a different agenda. I don't know, clash of personality, whatever it happened to be, and people wouldn't go, right? And the thing about like a disciplinary community is it really relies on engagement. Okay? Professional development really relies on teachers being connected to each other. What I think the MultiAcademy Trust offers that is different, and again, this is not me saying it's a recipe for guaranteed success, but I think it offers the potential because that organisation sets the strategic direction for all the schools in the group. So a single school doesn't simply say, without the trust agreement at least, well, we don't want to back this anymore. We don't think we don't want our teachers to do that. And what the trust can do is it can organise like time, for example. It can start to make sure that teachers have that time, so that they're not doing it all in their own hours. They're doing it perhaps while they're at school. And we're seeing some of that stuff going on. So you're right. It's not that being in the trust is like a panacea, but for me, there's a potential there that I think is really exciting.
Yeah. I was going to ask you. Obviously, we talked a little bit about sort of the budgeting issues and potential strike action. You sort of covered that. But if you were Education Secretary, what's one thing you would add to education and what's one thing you would take away or remove?
Oh, it's a great question. So add money. Am I allowed to say that? That's like the obvious answer.
Although I would like, if you're going to say money, I want to know...
I represent this point, but I'll tell you something as an individual. I'll give you an individual reflection. And my reflection is, one of the things I really love about being part of this country is the way we put our arms around each other. It's the way that we support people who are vulnerable, and that's children, that's adults. And so from my perspective, I think that's a really important obligation of the state, is to make sure we're looking after people who need our help. So as a private individual, would I countenance the government increasing taxes if I knew that was going to lead to better quality of services and so on? As an individual citizen, I can deal with that. What I think we need in the system is we need more funding. What I would say is, also, there's the point about general funding across the system, but we've got some specific pinch points as well. And part of the sector I'm really concerned about is SEN. Really clear messages coming from the SEN sector. We're hearing this not just now with the cost of living crisis, but we were hearing this through the pandemic as well. Real cost pressures that they were facing at that time. Just to stay open and to stay safe. And that's continued and worsened as a result of the cost pressures. So I think we need some more funding, but particularly around SEN.
Would you like to see more alternative provision and more sort of funding going into that?
Yeah, I think it's a similar story to SEND is what I'm hearing from the sector. Again, I think it's that part of the sector that governments don't speak about enough. It can feel like it's sort of hived off somewhere. But it's a really important part, like alternative provision. The clue's in the name, right? So for some children, that provision, that alternative provision, is the thing that they need in order to get the best quality of education. Why the heck wouldn't we fund that and make sure it's got the right level of funding? And what I'm hearing then is that there are issues there as well that need to be addressed.
And what about that's add money? What about remove?
Oh, the remove.
The takeaway.
The takeaway. Yeah. That's a really good question. So, one of the things that I'm worried about in the system is the pendulum swing that we sometimes see taking place. You're on Twitter, aren't you? We see it with the progs and the trads, and that sense that I think we see building a little bit now. But actually, we need to reform education, and to do that, we need to do stuff that's very, very different to what we're doing at the moment. I worry about it again. I worry about it for teachers on the ground, because of course it's easy for people in policy or in government to sit on high and say, okay, right, we're going to reform assessment, or we're going to this new initiative. often it's the teachers on the ground who feel the burn there, right? Because they're suddenly having to say, well, hang on a minute, I don't know, we were doing the knowledge-rich curriculum. You're telling me that doesn't matter anymore, So my message on talking to policymakers about this is about saying, from all different political parties, is about saying to them, actually, you've got to do better than reinforcing the pendulum swing. What we need to do is we need to build, right? We need to build on the good stuff that's happening in the education system at the moment. And let's not just swing in a completely different direction because it feels intuitively the right thing to do when you reform. My worry about that is teacher burnout. We've got to do better for teachers.